Most daughters get a piece of jewelry or a heartfelt toast when they turn 30. My parents gave me a public eviction from the family tree. Standing on stage at the Crestview Room, blinded by spotlights and my mother's cruel smile, I watched them weaponize a DNA test to destroy me. But they made one fatal calculation error: they didn't check the guest list. The man they spent 3 decades lying about was watching from the shadows. And he had receipts. The vibration of my phone against the cheap laminate of my nightstand was not a sound I associated with good news. It was 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, a time usually reserved for alarm clocks and the gentle hum of the refrigerator, not the frantic buzzing that signaled a crisis in the Griffin household. I rolled over, burying my face in the pillow for a split second, praying it was a wrong number, but I knew better. In the ecosystem of my family, I was the first responder, the crisis manager, and the bank, all rolled into one 30-year-old marketing manager. I picked up the phone. It was my mother. "Linda. Haley. Pick up. We have a situation with the water heater," she said, her voice tight and high, skipping the pleasantries entirely. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Mom, it is 6 in the morning. Can this not wait until I have had coffee? It is leaking. Haley, everywhere. Your father is trying to turn the valve, but you know his back. We need a plumber, and you know we are tight until the pension check clears next week." I sighed, a heavy, familiar weight settling in my chest. It was always something. Last month, it was the transmission on my sister's car. The month before that, an unexpected dental bill for my father. I looked around my bedroom. It was small, functional, and decidedly unglamorous. I had been saving for a down payment on a condo for 5 years, but the savings account seemed to drain as fast as it filled, usually in the direction of Westbrook Hills, where my parents lived in a house they could barely afford to maintain. How much, I asked, swinging my legs out of bed. "Probably $400 or $500 for the emergency call," Linda said, her voice dropping to that pitiful register she used when she needed something. "We just do not have it. Haley, we spent so much on that special dinner for Madison's promotion last week. The promotion Madison had lost 2 days later because she simply stopped showing up." I bit my tongue. There was no point in arguing. The narrative was set in stone. Madison was fragile and needed celebrating to build her confidence. I was strong, capable, and therefore expected to pay. "I will transfer the money," I said, my voice flat. "Text me the plumber's number. I will call them. You are a good girl. Haley. I do not know what we would do without you. Really, we sacrifice so much to raise you girls, and it is good to see one of you appreciates it." The call ended. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank screen. The phrase "we sacrifice so much" echoed in my head. It was the Griffin family motto, branded onto my psyche since I was old enough to understand English. They had sacrificed for my braces, for my clothes, for the roof over my head. Every dollar spent on me was a debt I was apparently expected to service for the rest of my life. I stood up and walked to the mirror attached to my closet door. I looked tired. Dark circles were starting to bruise the skin under my eyes that were a startling, vivid green, utterly unlike the muddy brown of my mother's or the pale blue of my father's. I pulled my hair back. My features were sharper, more angular than the soft, round faces that populated the rest of the Griffin family albums. Growing up, I had learned to ignore the comments. I remembered a 4th of July barbecue when I was 12. Our neighbor, Mr. Henderson, had been 3 beers deep and leaned over the fence, looking from my father to me. Funny how genetics work. "Bob," he had slurped. "That one looks like she fell out of a different tree entirely." Where did she get the height? My father had stiffened, his face going that blotchy red color it always did when he was embarrassed or angry. "She takes after a great aunt on Linda's side." He had snapped. "Now, do you want a burger or not, Mr.?" Henderson had laughed, but the question had stuck. I used to stare at the family photos in the hallway, looking for the great aunt on Linda's side. I never found her. I only found row after row of people who looked like they belonged together. And then me. standing slightly to the side, taller, leaner, and looking like I had been photoshopped in from a different life. I shook the memory off. I had work to do. By 9 in the morning, I was at my desk at Verve Tech, the mid-sized tech startup where I managed marketing campaigns for apps I barely understood. It was a good job. It paid well. It demanded 50 hours a week of my life, but it offered me something my family never did: clear expectations. If I did the work, I got the praise. If I hit the metrics, I got the bonus. There was no emotional bargaining, no guilt trips about sacrifices. My boss, Karen Blake, stopped by my cubicle around 10. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who terrified most of the junior staff, but she had always had a soft spot for me. "Haley, are we still on for the quarterly review meeting this afternoon?" she asked, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on my partition. "Yes, I have the slide deck ready," I said, forcing a smile. "You look exhausted," she observed, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Everything okay?" "Just family stuff," I said. "Boiler issues," Karen hummed, a sound of disapproval. "You do a lot for them, don't you?" "They are my parents," I said, the automatic defense rising to my lips. Karen looked at me for a long moment. "You know, loyalty is a virtue, Haley, but martyrdom is just a fast track to burnout. Take care of yourself. You have that big birthday coming up. Right 30 is a milestone. You should be excited." "I am." I lied. The truth was, I was dreading it. My 30th birthday was 2 weeks away, and my mother had decided to turn it into a production. For years, my birthdays had been afterthoughts, a card with a $20 bill. A dinner where the conversation revolved around Madison's latest breakup or my father's high blood pressure. But this year, Linda had fixated on the number 30. She wanted a party, a big one. She had rented the Crestview Room, a banquet hall in Oak Ridge Falls that was synonymous with wedding receptions and Rotary Club galas. It was expensive, far too expensive for people who could not afford a plumber. But when I had pointed this out, my father had slammed his hand on the table. "We want to do this for you." "Haley," he had shouted, "why do you always have to throw money in our faces? Can we not just have one nice thing without you auditing the books?" So I had relented. I always relented. At lunch, I met my friend and coworker Tessa Morales in the break room. Tessa was the opposite of me: fiery, outspoken, and fiercely protective. She knew more about the Griffin family dynamics than I probably should have shared. "So, let me get this straight," Tessa said, unwrapping a turkey sandwich. "You paid $500 for their plumber this morning, and yet they are throwing you a gala that probably costs $5,000. Make it make sense." "Haley, it is a deposit thing," I said, picking at my salad. "They put the deposit down months ago, apparently, before the cash flow issue started, and they want it to be perfect. Mom keeps saying it is going to be a night I will never forget." Tessa rolled her eyes. "That sounds like a threat, not a promise. She wants me to invite everyone." I continued. "You, obviously, but also Karen and Logan. She made me send her a guest list so she could approve the seating chart." "Seating chart," Tessa laughed. "It is a birthday party, not a royal wedding. Why are they doing this? They never do this. Maybe they are trying," I said softly. "Maybe they realize 30 is a big deal and they want to make up for, the past." Tessa looked at me with pity, which was worse than her anger. "Oh, honey, I hope so. I really do. But you have to admit, it is weird. They usually treat you like the hired help. Now suddenly you are the princess. They are my parents. Tess, I have to believe they love me." Tessa sighed and squeezed my hand across the table. "I know. I will be there. I will wear my best dress, and I will be on my best behavior. But if your dad makes one comment about your weight or your job, I am spilling red wine on him." I smiled, grateful for her deal. After work, I drove out to Westbrook Hills. It was a 40-minute drive from my apartment in the city to the sprawling, manicured suburbs where my parents lived. Their house was a 2-story colonial that looked impressive from the curb, but was slowly falling apart on the inside, a perfect metaphor for the family itself. I needed to drop off the check for the plumber. Since my father did not trust banking apps, he preferred paper trails, tangible proof of money changing hands. I let myself in with my key. The house smelled the way it always did, like lemon polish and stale cigarette smoke, though my father swore he had quit smoking 10 years ago. Mom. Dad. I called out, "In here, honey." Linda's voice drifted from the kitchen. I walked in to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of paper. She was a small woman with nervous hands and hair that was dyed a stiff, unmoving blonde. My sister, Madison, was lounging on the window seat, scrolling through her phone. Madison was 26, blonde, petite, and looked exactly like a younger version of our mother. She was the golden child, the one who needed protection, the one who could do no wrong because she was too delicate to handle consequences. "Hey, Haley," Madison said without looking up. "Thanks for the plumber money. The water was freezing this morning." "You are welcome," I said, keeping my tone neutral. I placed the check on the counter. Linda looked up, beaming. "Oh, good. You are here. I wanted to show you the centerpieces for the party. Look." She held up a printout of an elaborate floral arrangement. Lilies and white roses. Very tasteful. Very expensive. "Mom, these are beautiful." "But are you sure?" I asked. "I mean, with the house repairs?" "Stop it," Linda snapped, her smile vanishing instantly. "I told you. We are handling it. This is your 30th. It has to be perfect." We invited Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike from Wisconsin. They are driving down. And the entire Peterson clan. I barely know the Petersons. I said, "They are family friends." "Haley, it reflects well on us to have a good turnout. Your father is going to give a speech. He has been working on it for days." A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. My father's speeches were usually rambles about his own work ethic, peppered with backhanded compliments about how difficult raising daughters could be. "That sounds great," I said. I needed a glass of water. I walked over to the sink, stepping around the trash can that was overflowing slightly. As I reached for a glass, something in the trash caught my eye. It was a crumpled envelope, distinctive blue and white branding, Gentrace. I froze. Gentrace was one of those DNA testing companies that had become popular in the last few years. People used them to find lost cousins or discover they were 12% Scandinavian. I reached down and plucked the envelope out of the trash. It was empty. "Mom," I asked, holding it up, "did you guys take a DNA test?" Linda looked up, and for a split second, I saw genuine panic in her eyes. She snatched the paper from the table and stood up, walking quickly toward me. "Oh, no. Do not be silly. It was just junk mail. Some silly ancestry ad. I threw it out. It looks like the packaging for a kit." I said, examining the torn edge. "Like the box came in this?" Linda laughed. A brittle, high-pitched sound. "You know how they send things these days, trying to trick you into buying. Give me that. Haley, it is garbage." She took the envelope from my hand and shoved it deep into the trash, piling coffee grounds on top of it. "Why would we need a DNA test?" Madison chimed in from the window seat. Finally looking up, "We know who we are. We are Griffins. Unfortunately." She laughed at her own joke. Linda did not laugh. She looked pale. "Anyway," Linda said, turning her back to me to wipe down the counter, "do not worry about silly things. Focus on the party. Did you ask Logan about his suit?" "It needs to be dark blue or black. No gray. It looks cheap in photos." I let it go. It was just an envelope, but the way she had reacted, the speed with which she had crossed the kitchen. The tremor in her hand stayed with me. I stayed for dinner, which was a mistake. My father, Robert, came home from his job at the logistics warehouse in a foul mood. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and heavy, with a face that had settled into a permanent scowl. "The balloon payment is due on the house in 3 months, he announced as he shoveled meatloaf onto his plate. I stiffened. "Here it comes. I thought you refinanced." I said, "The bank is being difficult." Robert grumbled. "They want more equity." "It is ridiculous. After 30 years of paying taxes in this town, You would think a man could get some respect. He looked at me. You know, Haley, if you were not paying so much rent on that apartment in the city, you could move back here. Help us out. We could convert the basement. Dad, I am 30 years old, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I am not moving into the basement. Madison giggled. Can you imagine Haley in the dungeon? It is not a dungeon, Robert snapped. It is a perfectly good living space. We sacrificed plenty of space for you girls growing up. Gave you the best rooms. I felt the familiar guilt rising. Suffocating and hot. I know. Dad, I appreciate it. But I have my job. I have my life. Your life. Robert scoffed. You mean your career? You are 30. Haley. No ring. No kids. Just a career and a cat. I do not have a cat. I said, and I have Logan. Logan? Robert muttered. He is a soft one. That boy. Not sure he has the spine to handle a Griffin woman. I put my fork down. I was no longer hungry. I should go. I have an early start tomorrow. Run away. Then, Robert said, waving his fork at me. Just like you always do. But do not forget, we are throwing you that party. We are doing right by you, even if you do not want to help us with the house. I drove home in silence, the radio off. The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy stone in my gut. They were my parents. They were struggling. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I should help more, but I was already drowning. Between the rent, the student loans they had promised to help with, but never did, and the constant loans to Madison and them, I had barely $500 in my savings account. When I got back to my apartment, Logan was there. He had a key, a symbol of commitment I cherished. He was sitting on the couch, reading a book, the lamp casting a warm glow over his face. Logan was everything the Griffin men were not: calm, kind, and steady. He worked as a landscape architect, spending his days making things grow rather than tearing things down. Hey, he said, looking up as I walked in, you look like you went 12 rounds with a boxer. 12 rounds with Linda and Robert, I said, kicking off my heels and collapsing onto the couch beside him. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. What was it this time? The usual. Money, the house, my biological clock, my general ungratefulness. Logan sighed, kissing the top of my head. Haley, we talked about this. You have to set boundaries. They drain you. You come back from that house looking like a ghost. I know, I whispered, but they are family. That does not give them a free pass to treat you like an ATM in a punching bag. Logan said gently. I closed my eyes. It is complicated. Logan, you do not understand. Your parents are normal. They support you. My parents feel like they are owed something, and if I do not pay up, I am failing them, and disappointing them feels like worse than death. He tightened his hold on me. It is not worse than death. Hales. It is just uncomfortable, and you can survive uncomfortable. I did not answer. I just let him hold me, wishing I could borrow some of his peace. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and party preparations. Linda texted me daily with updates. The cake was ordered 3 tiers, vanilla with raspberry filling. The DJ was booked some friend of a friend who gave them a discount. The dress code was cocktail elegant. I tried to be excited. I really did. I bought a new dress, a deep emerald green sheath that Tessa said made my eyes look radioactive in a good way. I booked a hair appointment. I tried to convince myself that this party was an olive branch, a sign that we were moving into a new phase of our relationship where I was respected as an adult. Then came the morning of my birthday. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds. 30. I was 30 years old. I lay in bed for a moment, waiting for the existential dread to set in, but it did not come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had a job I liked, a boyfriend I loved, and a best friend who had my back. Maybe 30 was going to be okay. I walked out to the kitchen to make coffee. There was a knock at the door. I frowned, glancing at the microwave clock. It was 8 in the morning on a Saturday. Logan was still asleep in the bedroom. I opened the door. A delivery driver stood there, holding a massive bouquet of flowers. It was not the usual grocery store arrangement. This was stunning white orchids, deep blue hydrangeas, and soft greenery that smelled like a forest after rain. "Delivery for Haley Griffin," the driver asked. "That is me," I said, bewildered. He handed me the flowers and a clipboard to sign. "Happy birthday. Thank you." I carried the heavy vase into the kitchen and set it on the counter. They were breathtaking. My first thought was Logan. But Logan was not really a flower guy. He bought me plant succulents, ferns, things that lasted. This was extravagant. I searched for the card. It was a small, thick envelope tucked into the greenery. I pulled it out and opened it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, slanted script in blue ink. "I am sorry it took me this long. D." I stared at the card. D. I did not know a D. I knew a David in accounting, but we were not close. I knew a Danielle from college, but we had not spoken in 5 years. Logan shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Whoa, who died?" "It is my birthday," I said, still staring at the card. "Right. Happy birthday, babe." He came over and kissed my cheek. "I did not get you those. I got you the noise-canceling headphones you wanted." "I know." I said, I do not know who these are from. Let me see." He took the card. "D. Who is D?" "I have no idea. Maybe it is a mistake. Maybe the florist mixed up the cards." "Probably," Logan said, shrugging. "Nice flowers. Though, must have cost a fortune." I looked at the orchids again. They were beautiful, but they gave me a strange feeling, a prickle of unease at the back of my neck. "I am sorry it took me this long." What did that mean? I shoved the card into my purse, burying it under receipts and lip balm. I would call the florist later and ask, right now. I had to get ready. Linda wanted me at the Crestview room by 5 o'clock sharp for family photos before the guests arrived. I did not know it then, but those flowers were the first crack in the dam. The water was about to break, and I was standing directly in its path, holding a bouquet from a stranger and hoping my parents would finally love me. The drive to the Crestview room took 20 minutes. Logan drove, his hand resting on my knee. I wore the green dress. I had spent an hour on my hair, curling it into soft waves. I looked the part, the successful daughter, the one who made it. "You nervous?" Logan asked as we pulled into the parking lot. "A little," I admitted. "I just want tonight to go well. I want them to be happy. They should be happy just to have you," Logan said firmly. The venue was nice. I had to admit, a brick building with ivy climbing the walls. A sign out front read, "Happy 30th birthday Haley" in big plastic letters. We walked inside. The air conditioning was blasting. The room was decorated in silver and gold balloons. A large projector screen was set up at the front of the room. Currently cycling through a slideshow of my childhood photos. There I was at 5, missing a front tooth. There I was at 10, looking awkward in oversized glasses. Linda came rushing toward us, clapping her hands. "You are here. You are late, Mom." "It is 4:55, I said. "You said 5. Close enough. Come. We need to get the lighting right. Logan, you stand over there." "No, not there. You are blocking the light." "Haley, stand next to your father." Robert was standing by the head table, wearing a suit that was a size too small. He was already holding a drink, a whiskey sour, by the look of it. "Happy birthday, kid," he said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Big day." "Thanks. Dad." He looked at me, his eyes slightly glazed. "You look good. Expensive. I bought the dress myself," I said automatically. "Of course you did," he muttered. Maddie appeared, wearing a dress that was slightly too short and far too sparkly. She looked like a disco ball. "Happy birthday." "Hales, this place is amazing." "Right?" Mom went all out. "It is beautiful," I said, hugging her. Guests started to trickle in around 5:30. My boss, Karen, arrived with a bottle of wine. Tessa came in wearing a killer red dress and gave me a thumbs up from across the room. The Peterson clan arrived, loud and boisterous, filling the space with noise. I spent the next hour shaking hands, accepting hugs, and smiling until my face hurt. I felt like a politician running for office. Linda was everywhere, directing traffic, telling the waiters when to bring the appetizers, grabbing the microphone to make announcements. This is her night. I heard her tell Aunt Carol. But we did all the work. Haley is so busy with her career, she does not have time for family traditions. I gritted my teeth and took a sip of champagne. Around 7 o'clock, dinner was served, chicken cordon bleu, and roasted vegetables. It was standard banquet fare. I sat at the head table between Logan and Maddie. Linda and Robert sat on the other side of Maddie. After the plates were cleared, the lights dimmed, a spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the room. My father stood up, adjusting his tie. He walked to the microphone, the feedback whining briefly before settling. "Can I get everyone's attention?" Robert boomed. The room quieted down. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began, swaying slightly. 30 years. It is a long time. I remember the night Haley was born. It was raining. I had pulled a double shift at the factory. I was tired. So tired. He paused for effect. Raising kids is not easy. It takes everything you have. Your money, your time, your dreams. Linda and we gave it all up. We wanted the best for our girls, especially Haley. She was our project. I flinched. Project. We worked hard to mold her. Robert continued. To make sure she had the opportunities we did not. And look at her now, a manager, living in the city. He gestured vaguely in my direction. There was polite applause. But sometimes you wonder, he said, his voice taking on a darker edge. You wonder if they appreciate it. You wonder if they understand the cost. Logan squeezed my hand under the table. His grip was tight. And that is why tonight is so special, Linda interrupted, stepping up to the microphone and practically shoving Robert aside. She was beaming, but her eyes were cold, hard flint. We wanted to do something truly special for Haley's 30th, Linda said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Something revealing. She gestured to the projector screen. The childhood photos vanished. In their place, the dashboard of a website appeared, blue and white, Gentrace. My heart stopped. The envelope in the trash. We know how much Haley cares about facts, Linda said. She's a very factual person, always checking the numbers. So, we decided to give her the ultimate fact. We took a DNA test for Haley to learn more about where we come from. A murmur went through the crowd. I felt cold, ice water running through my veins, and the results, well, they were quite surprising. Linda said. She clicked a remote. The screen changed. A pie chart appeared. Robert Griffin versus Haley Griffin. Parent/child relationship, 0% probability. No shared DNA. The room went silent. Dead silent. I could hear the hum of the projector fan. Linda looked at me, her smile gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated malice. It turns out, Linda said into the microphone, her voice echoing off the walls, that Robert is not your father. Haley gasps. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered loudly against a plate. We have been living a lie, Linda continued, her voice trembling now with feigned emotion. A betrayal. I was young. I made a mistake. But Robert raised you. He took you in. He fed you. He clothed you. Even though you are not his blood, even though you are the product of a mistake, she pointed a shaking finger at me. And we thought you deserved to know. She screamed, her composure cracking. We thought everyone should know what we endured, the charity we gave you. You act so superior, with your job and your city apartment, but you are nothing. You are not even a Griffin. Robert grabbed the mic back, his face purple. You ungrateful girl, he shouted. Spit flying. I spent 30 years paying for another man's sin. 30 years. And you treat us like burdens. You should be paying us back every cent I could not breathe. The room was spinning. I saw Karen's mouth hang open. I saw Tessa standing up, knocking her chair over. I saw Logan staring at the screen. Frozen. I stood up. my legs shaking so hard I had to grip the table. "Mom, Dad," I whispered, "what are you doing?" "We are cutting you off," Robert yelled. "No inheritance. No more pretending you are out." The whispers started then, rising like a wave. "Did you hear that? Not his kid? A mistake. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. This was my birthday. This was the night I was supposed to never forget." Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos. It was not loud, but it was deep, authoritative, and terrifyingly calm. "That is enough." Everyone turned. Standing at the back of the room, near the exit, was a man. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that looked more expensive than the entire venue. He had silver hair and broad shoulders. He walked forward, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He did not look at Linda. He did not look at Robert. He looked straight at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw my own eyes looking back at me. Vivid, startling green. "Who the hell are you?" Robert demanded. Though his voice wavered, the man stopped 10 feet from the head table. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of papers. "My name is Daniel Cross," he said, his voice carrying without a microphone. "And I am the man you have been extorting for 29 years. He threw the papers onto the nearest table. They fanned out. "Emails, bank transfers. You knew," Daniel said, pointing at Linda. "You have known since she was a baby. You told me she was mine. You took my money. You told me if I ever came near her, you would call the police. You sold me pictures of her. You sold me silence." The room erupted. Linda went white. Robert looked like he was about to have a stroke. I looked at the man, Daniel. The card in my purse. "I am sorry it took me this long." I looked at my mother. Her face was a mask of terror. "Haley," Daniel said, his voice softening as he looked at me. "I did not know they were going to do this. I came to stop them. I am so sorry." I looked from him to the parents who had just eviscerated me for sport, the parents who had charged me for existing. I did not scream. I did not cry. The heavy wooden doors of the Crestview room swung open, and for a moment, the sudden wall of noise and light made me want to step backward into the safety of the parking lot. But Linda Griffin, my mother, was already there, her hand gripping my upper arm with a strength that belied her petite frame. She steered me forward into the room as if I were a float in a parade that had momentarily drifted off course. Applause washed over me. It was a polite, rippling sound at first, then it grew louder as people spotted us. The room had been transformed. Thousands of tiny white fairy lights were draped across the ceiling, creating a false, glittering sky above the rented banquet tables. A large projector screen at the far end of the hall was already cycling through images of my life, each photo dissolving into the next with a cheesy star wipe effect. There I was in a bathtub at age 2. There I was holding a participation trophy for soccer at age 8. There I was with braces, looking awkward and gangly at 14. "Smile, Haley," my mother hissed in my ear, her voice dropping to a register that only dogs and obedient daughters could hear. "Shoulders back, everyone is looking." I forced the muscles of my face into a smile. It felt tight, like a mask that had been glued on crooked. We walked deeper into the room. The air smelled of chafing dish fuel, heavy perfume, and floor wax. It was the scent of every wedding reception and retirement party held in Oak Ridge Falls for the last 20 years. My boss, Karen Blake, was standing near the bar with a glass of white wine in her hand. She waved, her expression a mix of support and mild confusion, likely wondering why a 30-year-old marketing manager was having a debutante ball. My boyfriend, Logan, walked on my other side, his hand warm against the small of my back. He leaned in close. "This is a lot," he murmured. "Are you okay?" "I am fine," I lied. "Just get me a drink, please." Linda released my arm to flutter toward a group of relatives I had not seen in a decade. I watched her go. She was in her element. She was wearing a silver dress that shimmered under the lights, and she moved with the frantic, bird-like energy of a woman determined to prove something. To whom? I was not sure. The neighbors, the relatives. Herself, I scanned the room. It was a strange mix of my two worlds. On the left side of the room, clustered around two tables, were my coworkers from Verve Tech and a few college friends. Tessa Morales was there, looking stunning in red, already holding court and making people laugh. On the right side was the Griffin contingent, a sea of aunts, uncles, and cousins from Westbrook Hills and beyond. People who still pinched my cheek and asked why I had not moved back home yet. I spent the first hour circulating. I shook hands. I accepted hugs from perfumes that made my nose itch. I answered the same 3 questions over and over again. Yes, 30 feels just the same as 29. No, Logan and I have not set a date yet. Yes, work is very busy. My father, Robert, was holding court near the buffet line. He had clearly started celebrating early. His face was flushed a deep, unhealthy red, and his tie was already loosened, hanging askew around his thick neck. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand and was gesturing wildly with the other. "Talking to my Uncle Mike," Haley Roberts shouted when he saw me, his voice booming over the soft jazz playing on the speakers. "There she is, the woman of the hour." He draped a heavy arm around my shoulders, pulling me into a side hug that smelled of whiskey and Old Spice. "We were just talking about you, kid," Robert said, slurring slightly. "Telling Mike here about how much that degree of yours cost us. Worth every penny. Though, right?" I stiffened. "I paid off my own student loans." "Dad," Robert waved his hand dismissively. Details. We supported you while you got it. We put the roof over your head. That is what counts." He took a long swallow of his drink, his eyes glassy. Dinner was announced before I could respond. We shuffled to the head table, which was set up on a raised platform like a tribunal. I sat in the center, flanked by Logan and my sister, Madison. Maddie was scrolling on her phone under the table, looking bored. "Nice party," Maddie muttered without looking up. "Mom is freaking out about the centerpieces. By the way, apparently, the florist used the wrong shade of cream." "It looks fine," I said, looking at the arrangement of lilies in front of me. "It is never fine with her," Maddie said, finally glancing at me. "You know that. She wants everyone to think we are the Kennedys or something." "It is embarrassing." For once, I agreed with my sister. The meal passed in a blur of rubbery chicken and lukewarm vegetables. I barely ate. My stomach was a knot of anxiety. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. The Griffin family dynamic was built on a foundation of transactional guilt. And a party this expensive meant the bill, emotional or financial, was coming due. As the plates were being cleared, the lights in the hall dimmed further. A spotlight cut through the darkness, hitting the podium where a microphone waited. My father stood up. He swayed slightly, catching himself on the edge of the table. He picked up his glass and walked to the podium. The feedback whine of the microphone made half the guests wince. "Testing, testing," Robert mumbled. Tapping the mic, the room fell silent. Faces turned toward the stage. I felt Logan's hand find mine under the tablecloth. He squeezed it hard. "Welcome, everyone," Robert said, his voice amplified and echoing slightly. "Thank you all for coming out tonight to celebrate Haley. 30 years. Wow." He paused, looking down at his feet, then back up at the crowd. "You know, raising kids is not easy. It is the hardest job in the world. Nobody tells you that when you're starting out. They tell you about the cute moments. They do not tell you about the double shifts. They do not tell you about the debt." I stared at my water glass. This was his standard opening, the martyr's lament. "Linda and I, we gave up a lot," Robert continued, his voice gaining strength. "I had dreams. You know, I wanted to buy a boat. I wanted to travel. But then the girls came along. And you do what you have to do. You sacrifice. You put your own life on hold for 20, 30 years. He gestured toward me with his glass, splashing a little whiskey onto the podium. She was our project. That is the best way to describe it. We looked at her and we said, we are going to mold this one. We are going to make sure she succeeds, no matter what it costs us. And it cost us plenty." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. Our project. Not his daughter. His project. Like a deck he had built, or a car he had restored. But look at the result, Robert said, spreading his arms. A manager. A city girl. She pays her taxes. She shows up on time. We did good. Linda, we did good. He looked over at my mother, who was beaming, tears shimmering in her eyes. So here is to Haley, Robert finished, raising his glass. And here is to us, to the parents who did the heavy lifting so she could fly. He drank. The room applauded, but the sound was thin, hesitant. Even the guests could feel the strange, resentful undercurrent in his words. Thank you, Robert Linda chirped, springing up from her seat as if she had been ejected. She took the microphone from him, smoothing down her silver dress. That was beautiful. Honey, she said into the mic, but we have one more surprise for tonight. A fun surprise. She signaled to the DJ booth. The music stopped completely. Haley, Linda said, turning to look at me. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were hard, glittering with a strange, frantic intensity. You know how much we value the truth in this family. We value history. We value knowing where we come from. I frowned. I had no idea where she was going with this. So, for your 30th birthday, Linda continued, her voice taking on a theatrical lilt, we decided to give you a gift that money cannot buy. We decided to give you the truth about your heritage. She reached into a tote bag beneath the podium and pulled out a laptop. She plugged it into the projector cable with practiced ease. We took a DNA test. Linda announced brightly. The screen behind her flickered. The slideshow of my childhood photos vanished. In its place, a web browser appeared, magnified to 10 feet tall. The logo in the corner was unmistakable Jen Trace. A murmur of interest went through the room. People shifted in their chairs, expecting a breakdown of percentages: 20% Irish, 10% German, a fun little cocktail of nationalities. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. The envelope in the trash, the way she had hidden it. Linda clicked the mouse. We got the results back a few days ago, she said, her tone dropping, becoming serious, almost somber. And I have to say, we were shocked. Well, Robert was shocked. She looked at my father. He was staring at the table, his jaw clenched tight, his face a mask of misery and anger. The screen refreshed. A dashboard appeared. It showed two profiles, Robert Griffin and Haley Griffin. Between them was a large, bold graphic, a circle. Inside the circle was the number 0, 0% DNA shared, parent/child relationship not detected. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the banquet hall. I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. I could hear the ice melting in the water pitcher on our table. Linda let the image hang there for a long moment, allowing the guests to absorb it. It appears, Linda said into the microphone, her voice echoing with a chilling calmness, that Robert is not your biological father. Haley, gasps erupted. A woman at the back of the room said, "Oh my God," loud enough to be heard. Tessa stood up at her table, her hand covering her mouth. I sat frozen. I could not move. I could not breathe. My eyes were locked on that 0. Linda continued, pacing slightly on the stage now. We have been living with a difficult truth for 30 years. A betrayal. A mistake I made when I was young and foolish. But Robert is a saint. She gestured to him again. He knew. She said, her voice rising with emotion. He knew you were not his, and he married me anyway. He raised you anyway. He paid for your clothes, your food, your college applications. He treated you like his own flesh and blood, even though every time he looked at you, he was reminded of the pain. She turned to face me directly. The spotlight caught the tears streaming down her face, tears that looked practiced, weaponized, and we thought you deserved to know. Haley, she said, her voice shaking, we thought it was time to stop pretending, because frankly, your attitude lately has been hurtful. My attitude, I whispered. the words barely making it past my lips. Yes, hurtful Linda cried, gripping the podium. You are so distant. You act like you are too good for us. You complain about helping us with the bills. You complain about visiting. When all this time, you should have been on your knees thanking this man. She pointed at Robert. He is not your father, she screamed, but he did the job. And you are just an ungrateful beneficiary of his charity. Robert stood up then. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. She is right, he shouted, his voice thick with drink and rage. He looked at the crowd, seeking validation. I raised her. Me, I worked double shifts for a kid that is not even mine. And what do I get? Disrespect. She counts every dollar she lends us. He turned on me. His face twisted into a snarl I had never seen before. You have been taking advantage of us. Haley, for 30 years, you are an intruder in this family. You are not a griffin. You are a mistake that I paid for. The room was in chaos. People were whispering, arguing. Some were standing up to leave. Others were filming with their phones. I stood up, my legs trembling so violently I had to lean against the table. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing my chest. Mom, I choked out. Dad, why are you doing this? Why here? Because you needed a wake-up call, Robert yelled. And let me tell you something else. Since you are so fond of your money, you can keep it, but do not expect a dime from us. I am changing the will tomorrow. You are out. Haley, you get nothing. I looked at Maddie. She was staring at her plate, crying silently, refusing to look at me or our parents. I never asked for a DNA test. I said, my voice rising, bordering on hysterical. I did not know. You never told me. You should have known, Linda retorted. Look in the mirror. You do not belong with us. I felt like I was drowning. The faces of the guests' co-workers, neighbors, strangers swam before my eyes. They were judging me, pitying me, laughing at me. Suddenly, a movement at the back of the room caught my eye. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. A man stood up. He was sitting at a table near the exit, almost in the shadows. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He had silver hair and a posture that commanded attention. He walked into the center aisle. He did not rush. He moved with a deliberate, terrifying calm. That is enough, he said. His voice was not a shout, but it cut through the noise like a knife. It was a deep, resonant baritone. Linda froze on stage. Robert stopped his ranting and squinted into the darkness. Who is that? Someone whispered near me. The man walked until he was standing 10 feet from the head table. He stopped and looked up at the stage, then turned his gaze to me. I felt a shock of recognition that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with biology. He had my eyes. The same vivid, startling green that had always made me the odd one out in the Griffin family photos. He had the same sharp jawline, the same height. My name is Daniel Cross, the man said, addressing the room but keeping his eyes on Robert. And I suggest you stop talking before you incriminate yourself further. Robert's face went from red to a pale, sickly gray. You, Robert whispered. What are you doing here? I was invited, Daniel said smoothly. Or rather, I saw the invitation online, and since my daughter was the guest of honor, I thought it was time I attended. He turned to the guests, addressing them as if this were a board meeting and not a family implosion. My name is Daniel Cross. I am Haley's biological father. A collective gasp went through the room. It was the sound of 200 people holding their breath at once. And contrary to the fairy tale Linda just spun for you, Daniel continued, reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket. I did not abandon anyone. And this was not a secret kept from me. He pulled out a sheaf of papers. They were folded, but he snapped them open with a sharp crack. I received a match alert from Gen Trace 6 months ago, Daniel said, holding up a printout. I tried to contact Haley through the website. When I got no response, I reached out to Linda and Robert to ask for their blessing to introduce myself. He turned to look at my mother. Linda was gripping the podium so hard her knuckles were white. She looked terrified. "And what did you tell me?" Linda Daniel asked, his voice hardening. Linda said nothing. She just shook her head frantically. "You told me that if I came near her, you would file a restraining order," Daniel said. "You told me that Haley hated me, that she knew about me and wanted nothing to do with me." He turned to me. I stood there, paralyzed, tears drying on my cheeks. I never knew." I whispered, "I know that now," Daniel said gently. He turned back to Robert. "But that is not the worst of it, is it, Bob?" Because 30 years ago, when Linda told me she was pregnant, she also told me that if I wanted to be part of the child's life, I had to pay. Daniel walked over to the nearest guest table, table 4, where the Peterson clan sat, and dropped a stack of documents onto the tablecloth. "Here are the emails," Daniel said, his voice ringing out. "From 1996, from 2005, from last year, demands for money, cash for silence, payments for keeping the secret." He pulled another document from his pocket, an old yellowed piece of paper, and here is the certified letter from 1995, signed by both Linda and Robert Griffin, acknowledging my paternity and agreeing to accept monthly child support payments in exchange for my waiving parental rights. He looked at Robert with pure disgust. "You called her a charity case," Daniel said, his voice dripping with ice. "You called her a burden. But for 29 years, I have sent you a check every single month. Support payments, education funds, money that was supposed to go to Haley." He stepped closer to the head table. "Where is the money?" Robert Daniel asked softly, because looking at this cheap venue and your cheap suit, it certainly did not go to her. The room exploded. The silence shattered into 1,000 fragments of outrage. People were shouting. My boss, Karen, was standing on her chair, trying to see the documents. Tessa was yelling something at Linda that I could not hear, but definitely involved profanity. Robert looked like a cornered animal. He sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Daniel. You are lying. Those are fake. They are notarized," Daniel said calmly, "and I have the bank records to match." I looked at my parents, really looked at them. The mask had slipped completely. There was no martyrdom left on their faces, only greed, only fear. Only the ugly, naked truth of people who had sold their own child's identity for a monthly check and then had the audacity to ask for a refund on her 30th birthday. I felt sick, physically, violently sick. The room was spinning, the fairy lights blurring into streaks of white fire. "Haley," Logan said, grabbing my arm. "Haley, sit down. You are pale." I pulled my arm away. I could not sit down. I could not be here. I looked at the cake, sitting untouched on a side table. 3 tiers, vanilla and raspberry, paid for. I realized with a jolt of nausea, by the man standing in the center of the room, my father, the real one. I looked at Daniel. He was watching me, his expression full of a painful, hesitant hope. I did not speak to him. I could not. The bridge between us was built over a river of 30 years of lies, and I did not know how to cross it yet. I turned and ran. Haley Logan shouted. I pushed past him. I pushed past Maddie, who was still crying. I shoved open the double doors of the banquet hall, hitting the panic bar with both hands. The cool night air hit me like a slap. I stumbled out onto the concrete of the parking lot, my heels scraping against the grit. Behind me, the doors swung shut, muffling the chaos, but not silencing it. I heard footsteps running after me. Haley, wait, it was Tessa, and Logan. I reached my car, fumbling for my keys, my hands shaking so hard I dropped them. I leaned against the doorframe, gasping for air, trying to purge the feeling of the room from my lungs. I looked back at the building, the Crestview room, the scene of the crime. Inside, my parents were being dissected by the truth they had tried to twist, but I did not feel vindicated. I felt hollowed out. I slid down the side of my car to the pavement, burying my face in my hands, and for the first time that night, I let myself scream. The asphalt of the parking lot was cold and rough against my palms. I was sitting on the ground, leaning against the rear tire of my sedan, gasping for air as if the oxygen in Oak Ridge Falls had suddenly been siphoned away. My chest felt tight, a band of iron constricting my ribs, making every breath a shallow, terrified rattle. Haley, breathe. Just breathe. Look at me. Logan was crouched in front of me, his hands hovering near my shoulders but not touching me, as if he were afraid I might shatter. His face was pale, illuminated by the harsh orange glow of the street lamps. I cannot. I wheezed. I cannot breathe. You can, he said, his voice straining for calm. In for 4, out for 4. Come on. I tried to listen to him, but the noise from inside the banquet hall was still echoing in my head. The feedback of the microphone, my mother's screeching accusations, the collective gasp of 200 people watching my identity disintegrate on a projector screen. Behind Logan, the double doors of the Crestview room swung open again. A burst of noise escaped, shouting. The clatter of chairs before the doors were shoved shut. Is she okay? Oh my God. Did you see Robert's face? I think she is having a breakdown. The voices were close, too close. I squeezed my eyes shut. They were coming out to watch. The show was not over for them. The intermission had just moved to the parking lot. Back off. The voice was sharp, lethal, and distinctly Tessa. My best friend stepped into my line of sight, turning her back to me to face the small crowd of smokers and rubberneckers who had drifted out. Tessa Morales was 5'3", but in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. Give her space, Tessa barked. The show is over. Go back inside and eat your free cake. If I see one phone out, I will smash it. Try me. The murmurs died down. Feet shuffled against the pavement. Come on, let us go back in. Someone muttered. Tessa waited until they had retreated before she turned around and crouched beside Logan. Her eyes were fierce, but her hand, when she placed it on my knee, was gentle. They are gone. Hales, she said softly. It is just us. I nodded, finally managing to pull a ragged breath into my lungs. My hands were shaking so hard I had to clasp them together to stop the tremors. I have to go, I whispered. I have to get out of here. We are going, Logan said. Give me your keys. I will drive. I fumbled for the fob in my lap. But before I could hand it over, a shadow fell across us. I flinched, pressing my back harder against the tire. If it was my father, if it was Robert, I did not know what I would do. Scream vomit, but it was not Robert. The man standing a respectful 10 feet away was tall, his silhouette sharp against the light. He held his hands up, palms open, in a gesture of surrender. I am not going to come any closer, he said. His voice was deep, the same baritone that had silenced the room moments ago. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. It was Daniel. The man with my eyes. The man who had just nuked my life. I stared at him, up close. He looked older than he had from across the room. There were deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes, lines of worry and fatigue. He looked terrified. You? I croaked. I am sorry. He said immediately, I know that is not enough. I know I just blew up your world. Why, I asked. Why did you do it like that? I did not know. He said, shaking his head. I swear to you, Haley, I did not know they were going to do the DNA reveal. I thought it was just a party. I came to watch from the back. I just wanted to see you, to see what you look like as an adult. He took a half step forward, then stopped himself. Respecting the invisible boundary, when Linda started talking, when she put that slide up, I could not sit there and let them lie about you. He said, I could not let them paint you as some kind of mistake. You were never a mistake. I looked at him, searching for the lie, but his face was open, raw with sincerity. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for 30 years. You sent the flowers, I said. Yes, and the money. He nodded slowly. Every month, since 1996, I felt a fresh wave of nausea. My parents had cried poverty my entire life. They had made me feel guilty for needing braces, for needing school supplies, for existing. And all that time, There had been a check in the mail. "I cannot do this right now," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I cannot talk to you." "I understand," Daniel said. "I will go. I needed you to know that I did not come here to hurt you." He reached into his jacket pocket. I flinched again, but he only pulled out a small business card. He placed it on the hood of my car, moving slowly. "If you ever want answers, real answers, I am staying at the Marriott downtown, or you can email me." He looked at me one last time, his green eyes filled with a profound sadness. "Happy birthday. Haley, I really am sorry." He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the darkness of the parking lot. "Let us go," Tessa said, her voice tight. "Before I run after him and ask a few questions myself, or before Linda comes out here and I end up in jail for assault." Logan drove my car. I sat in the passenger seat, staring blankly at the passing streetlights. Tessa sat in the back, leaning forward between the seats, her hand resting on my shoulder. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. The reality of what had happened was too large, too jagged to wrap words around yet. When we got to my apartment, the silence broke. As soon as the door clicked shut, locking out the world, I collapsed onto the sofa. The safety of my own space, the familiar smell of my vanilla candle, the stack of unread magazines on the coffee table felt jarringly normal compared to the surreal horror of the last 3 hours. "Okay," Tessa said, dropping her purse on the floor and marching into the kitchen. "I am making tea, and then we are pouring brandy into the tea, and then we are figuring this out." Logan sat next to me, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted. He was a man who liked order, who liked plans. Tonight had been chaos. "Are you okay?" he asked, repeating the question he had asked in the parking lot. "No," I said. "I am definitely not okay." He sighed, rubbing his face. "That was insane. Your parents. I mean, I knew they were intense, but that was public cruelty. They hate me," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "They do not just resent me. They hate me. They do not hate you," Logan said automatically, trying to soothe me. "They are just messed up. They were drunk. They were emotional." "Logan, stop," Tessa called from the kitchen. She walked back in with 3 mugs. "Do not gaslight her. They just publicly disowned her on a projector screen while eating chicken cordon bleu. That is hate, or at least, it is something so toxic it might as well be hate." She set the mugs down and sat on the coffee table, facing me. "We need to look at the facts. Hales, the timeline." I took a sip of the tea. It was hot and strong. "The envelope," I said. "In the trash? 2 weeks ago?" "Right," Tessa said. "Jen Trace? Linda said it was junk mail." She lied. She lied about everything." I said. "And the flowers," Logan added. The card said, "I am sorry it took me this long." That was Daniel. He was trying to reach out. He said he tried to contact me through the website. I said, "But I never got a message." "Did you ever set up an account?" Tessa asked. "No, but Linda did. She used my name on the screen, Haley Griffin. She must have created a profile for me to run the test, which means she controlled the inbox. She blocked him. I realized she saw his messages and she blocked him, and then she planned the party." Why, Logan asked. Why throw the party if they knew the result was going to be 0%? Why not just keep it quiet because they wanted to hurt me? I said, my voice trembling, and because of the money. "What money?" Logan asked. "The money Daniel mentioned." I said, he said he sent checks for 29 years, support, education. My parents had just put a down payment on a house repair. They had rented the Crestview room. They had suddenly, after months of complaining about being broke, found the cash to stage a grand execution. They were squeezing him, Tessa said, her eyes widening. They probably told him, "We need money for the party," or something. Or maybe he stopped paying. He said he sent a letter. I remembered. He said he tried to contact them for a blessing. Maybe that spooked them. Maybe they realized the jig was up. My phone pinged. I looked at it. It was sitting on the cushion next to me. A notification from my email app. Sender Daniel Cross. Subject documentation. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Open it," Tessa whispered. I picked up the phone. My fingers felt numb. I tapped the notification. The email was brief. "Haley, I do not expect you to trust me, but I believe you deserve the evidence. Attached are the files I brought tonight, plus the history I spoke of. Please read them when you are ready." Daniel, there was a PDF attachment. I clicked it. The first page was a scanned letter. It was handwritten on lined paper, dated September 14th, 1995. I recognized the handwriting immediately. The looping L, the sharp, jagged T. It was my mother's writing, to Daniel Cross. "We acknowledge receipt of the check for $2,000. As agreed, you will not seek visitation rights. Robert is the father on the birth certificate. This money is for the child's expenses. Do not contact us again. Signed, Linda Griffin, Robert Griffin." I felt like I was reading a ransom note for my own life. "Scroll down," Tessa said, leaning over my shoulder. The next pages were bank records, scanned images of canceled checks and wire transfer confirmations. October 1996, $500. Memo child support, December $2,800. Memo Christmas/winter clothes, August 2014, $5,000. Memo Haley's college tuition. I stared at the screen. $5,000. August 2014. I remember August 2014. I whispered, I was a sophomore. Tuition was due. Mom told me they did not have a dime. She said Robert's hours got cut. I had to go to the financial aid office and take out an emergency loan. I'm still paying interest on that loan. "They took it," Tessa hissed. "They took the $5,000 and sent you to the loan shark." I kept scrolling. January 2015, $2,500. Memo books and supplies. June 2018, $10,000. Memo graduation gift/car fund. My car is a 12-year-old Honda I bought from a neighbor. I said, my voice sounding distant, detached. They told me I had to buy my own car to learn responsibility. There were dozens of them. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over 3 decades. Money sent specifically for me. Money that had vanished into the black hole of the Griffin household, into their renovations, their debts, Maddie's endless hobbies that she quit after 2 weeks. The last document in the file was an email, dated only 3 weeks ago. From Robert Griffin to Daniel Cross. Subject warning. If you attempt to contact our daughter, we will file harassment charges. We have a lawyer. We will tell everyone you are stalking her. She knows nothing about you, and she wants to keep it that way. Send the final payment for the venue rental, or we go to the police. The venue rental. I dropped the phone on the couch as if it were burning. They made him pay for the party. I said, they made him pay for the party where they humiliated me. Logan stood up and walked to the window. He ran his hands through his hair. This is criminal. This is fraud. It is evil, Tessa said. That is what it is. I closed my eyes. Memories were rearranging themselves in my head, shifting like tectonic plates. I remembered the anonymous scholarship I had received freshman year. $1,000. I had been so happy. I thought I had earned it, but it had vanished the next semester. Mom said there must have been a paperwork error. I remembered the times I had come home for holidays, bringing cheap gifts because I was broke, and Robert had sneered at me with that city job. You would think you could afford something better than a scarf. They had taken his money, and they had taken my self-worth. They had double-dipped. I need to call in sick. I said, I cannot go to work on Monday. I cannot see anyone. I will text Karen, Tessa said. She was there. She saw it. She will understand. Take the week. Take 2. I spent the next 3 days in a fugue state. I did not leave the apartment. I moved from the bed to the couch and back again. I ignored my phone, which was blowing up with texts from cousins and random guests. I blocked my parents' numbers after Linda sent a text that simply read, "You have embarrassed us beyond repair." The audacity was breathtaking. I cycled through emotions so fast it made me dizzy. 1 hour. I was in a rage, throwing pillows across the room, screaming into the empty air. The next, I was sobbing, grieving the loss of the parents I thought I had. Because even though they were critical and demanding, they had been mine. Now, they were just thieves who had held me hostage. And then there was the guilt, a strange, sticky guilt that coated everything. I found myself looking at Daniel's email again and again. I wanted to reply. I wanted to ask him questions. Did you love her? Did you want me? But every time I typed a word, I felt like I was betraying the people who raised me. It was a reflex, conditioned into me over 30 years. Loyalty to the Griffins above all else. Logan was trying, but I could feel him pulling away. He came over after work on Tuesday, bringing takeout. We sat on the floor, eating in silence. So, he said, poking at his noodles, Have you decided what you are going to do about what about them, about him, Daniel? I do not know. I said, I feel paralyzed. He nodded, not looking at me. It is a lot of baggage. Haley, I put my fork down. Baggage, I mean. Look at this. He gestured around the room. Though he meant the situation, your parents are at war. You have a biological father who is, well, he is a stranger with money. There are lawyers involved now. It is heavy. It is my life, Logan. It is not baggage. It is my life. I know, he said, finally looking at me. But I grew up in a house where people talked things out, where we did not have secret paternities and embezzlement. I do not know how to navigate this. I do not want to get in the middle of a war zone. You are my boyfriend, I said, my voice quiet. You are supposed to be in the foxhole with me. I am, he said, but he leaned back, creating distance between us. But I have to think about my future too. I want a quiet life, Haley. I want peace. This is not peace. And frankly, I am not sure I am ready to marry into a family that does things like this. The words hung in the air. Marry into... So you are saying I am too much trouble, I asked. I am saying I need time, he said, standing up. I think I should sleep at my place tonight. Let things cool down. He left 10 minutes later. He kissed me on the forehead, a dry, chaste peck that felt like a goodbye. I sat alone in the dark, feeling the second abandonment of the week. My parents had discarded me. Now Logan was backing away, afraid of the shrapnel. On Thursday, there was a knock at the door. I ignored it. I was wearing sweatpants I had not washed in 4 days, and I was eating dry cereal out of the box. Haley. Open up, it is Maddie. My sister. I froze. I did not want to see her. She was the golden child. She was the one they actually loved. Go away. Maddie, I shouted. I am not leaving. I know you are in there. Please. Hales. I have to show you something. I am scared. Her voice cracked on the word scared. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Madison was standing in the hallway, wearing a hoodie and no makeup. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked like a child. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. She burst into tears the moment she saw me. I am so sorry, she sobbed, throwing her arms around me. I am so sorry. I stood stiffly for a moment. Then, instinctively, I hugged her back. She was shaking. Come in, I said. We sat on the couch. Maddie wiped her nose on her sleeve. I knew, she said, her voice small. I pulled back. You knew. Not everything, she said quickly. I swear I did not know about the DNA test or the party, but I knew there was a secret. I knew there was money. Explain, I said, my voice hard. Since I was a teenager, she said, I would hear them whispering late at night. Mom would say, the check came, or he is late this month, and Dad would get so angry. He would say, that man ruined my life. I knew there was an other man. I thought maybe Mom had an affair and they were getting hush money. She looked down at her hands. But I never knew it was you. Haley, I swear, I thought it was just... leverage. And then, when the money got tight recently, they started fighting more, talking about how the well was running dry. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. 2 days ago, after the party, they were screaming at each other in the kitchen. I was in the living room. I turned on my voice memo app. I wanted proof that they were crazy. She tapped the screen and held the phone out to me. I pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, then clear. Angry voices cut through the static. Voice of Robert. Told you it was a stupid idea to do it in public. Now look at the mess. Voice of Linda. We had to do something. He was stopping the payments. He told me that was the last check. Voice of Robert. So you burned the bridge? You burned the girl. Now we have nothing, no leverage. Voice of Linda. We have the house. We paid the contractor with the venue money. Voice of Robert. That was $5,000. Linda. We need more than that to retire. We should have squeezed him for one last year before we cut her loose. We could have told him she was getting married or something. Made up a huge expense. Now he knows. Now she knows. Voice of Linda. She was never going to take care of us anyway. She is selfish. Just like him. At least now we do not have to pretend to like her. The recording ended. The silence in the apartment was heavy, suffocating. At least now we do not have to pretend to like her. That was the line that finally killed the hope. The tiny, stupid hope that had survived the party. The hope that maybe they were just hurt. Maybe they were just misguided. No, it was a transaction. I was a hostage they had grown tired of feeding. Maddie was crying again. They took money that was meant for us. Hale's, for you, and they spent it on garbage, on the house, on my dance lessons that I hated, on Dad's truck. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. I am sorry I never said anything. I was afraid. If I asked questions, they would stop buying me things. They would treat me like they treated you. I was a coward. I looked at my sister. She was a product of them, just like I was a product of Daniel. But she was waking up. You are here now, I said. That counts. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But the paralysis was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They committed fraud. I said, they stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. They extorted my father, and they slandered me. I turned back to Maddie. I am not just sad anymore. Maddie, I am done. What are you going to do? She asked, wiping her eyes. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the business card Daniel had left on the hood of my car. I turned it over in my fingers. Harbor Lane, attorneys at law, Elena Ward, partner, handwritten on the back, call her. I pay the retainer. He hadn't just given me his contact info. He had given me a weapon. I looked at the phone where the recording was saved. I looked at the emails on my laptop. I am going to stop being their project. I said, I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card. Reception. A voice answered. Harbor and Lane. Hi, I said, my voice steady for the first time in 4 days. My name is Haley Griffin. I believe I have a case regarding financial fraud and family law. I need to speak to Elena Ward. I caught my reflection in the dark television screen. I looked tired. I looked pale. But I looked like someone who was ready to fight. I need a lawyer, I said, and I need to schedule a meeting with Daniel Cross, the bell above the door of The Grind, a coffee shop tucked away on a side street in downtown Oak Ridge Falls, chimed as I pushed it open. It was 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. I should have been at work, managing marketing campaigns and sipping stale break-room coffee. Instead, I was wearing oversized sunglasses to hide my swollen eyes and meeting the man who had detonated my life 4 days ago. Daniel Cross was sitting at a corner table, far away from the window. He stood up the moment he saw me. He was wearing a navy sweater and jeans, looking far less imposing than he had in the charcoal suit at the Crestview room. In fact, he looked terrified. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him, and I noticed a slight tremor in his fingers. Haley, he said, his voice low. Thank you for coming. I did not smile. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down, keeping my purse on my lap as a shield. I am not here for a reunion. I said, my voice flat. I am here for the truth. You sent me a file full of bank transfers and emails. I want the context, and I want it now. Daniel nodded. Sitting back down slowly, he looked at the untouched black coffee in front of him. I understand, he said. Where do you want me to start? The beginning. I said, how did this happen? How did you and Linda happen? Daniel took a deep breath, looking out the window for a moment before meeting my gaze. My eyes were full of regret. It was 31 years ago, he began. I was 26, Linda was 24. We were both working at a conference in Chicago. I was in sales. She was working for a catering company. We met at the hotel bar. He paused, running a hand over his face. She was different then. Haley. She was fun, alive. She told me she was single. She told me she was unhappy in her town and wanted to leave. We spent 3 days together. It was intense. It was a fling. And then the conference ended, and she went back to Oak Ridge Falls, and I went back to Seattle. And Robert I asked. She never mentioned a Robert. Daniel said, not once. I found out later that she was already engaged to him. They got married 2 months after we met. I felt a twist in my stomach. My mother, the woman who preached sanctity and loyalty, had cheated on my father weeks before their wedding. When did you know about me? I asked. Not until you were almost 2 years old. Daniel said. My jaw tightened. 2 years, Daniel nodded. I got a phone call out of the blue. It was Linda. She was crying. She said she had a daughter. She said the baby looked exactly like me. She said, Robert, your father had no idea. He thought you were his. But she knew. I stared at him. So she called you to tell you why to clear her conscience. No, Daniel said, his voice hardening slightly. She called because they were in debt. Robert had lost his job at the plant. They were about to lose their house. She told me she needed money for the baby. For you. I closed my eyes, the humiliation washing over me again. I was a fundraising tool. She told me that if I did not help, you would suffer. Daniel continued. She said Robert was a proud man and would not take charity, but if I sent money to a private account, she could use it for groceries, for diapers, for your medical bills, and you just sent it. I sent $5,000 that first day. Daniel said, I wanted to come see you. I wanted a paternity test. I wanted to be a father. So why weren't you? I snapped. Why did you stay away? Because she threatened me. Haley? Daniel leaned forward, his expression intense. She told me that if I showed up in Oak Ridge Falls, she would tell everyone I was a stalker. She said she would tell the police I assaulted her in Chicago. She said she would destroy my life and, more importantly, she would ruin your life. She said if Robert found out, he would leave her, and you would grow up in a broken home with a mother who was a pariah. He took a sip of his coffee, his hand shaking again. I was young, I was scared, and I believed her. She made me feel like the only way to protect you was to stay away and pay for your life from a distance. So I made a deal. I would pay child support, generous support, and in exchange, she would keep the secret. I looked at the man across from me. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to hate him for being weak, for letting her manipulate him. But looking at the pain in his face, I realized he had been just as trapped as I was. We were both victims of Linda's narrative. And the letters, I asked. My voice softer. You mentioned letters. Every month. Daniel said, with the check. I wrote to you. I told you about my life. I sent photos. I sent birthday cards. I sent a silver locket when you turned 16. I never got a locket. I whispered, I got a gift card to a discount clothing store from them. Daniel looked like he might cry. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. When you were 18, he said, Linda told me to stop writing. She said you had found the box of letters in the attic. She said you read them and you burned them. She said you called me a stranger and told her you wanted nothing to do with me. She said you had chosen your real family. I felt the blood drain from my face. That is a lie. I never saw them. I never knew. I know that now, Daniel said, but back then, it broke me. I thought I had lost you forever, so I stopped writing, but I never stopped paying. I kept sending the money for college, for your car, because even if you hated me, I wanted you to be safe. He pushed the paper across the table toward me. It was a copy of a bank statement. August 2014, $5,000, wire transfer. That was the semester I almost dropped out because they said they had no money. I said, staring at the number, "They took your money and they made me take out a loan. They stole from both of us," Daniel said. I sat back, feeling a cold, hard rage settling in my chest. It was no longer the hot, chaotic anger of the birthday party. This was something distinct. This was the need for justice. "I need to go," I said, standing up. "Haley." "Wait," Daniel said, reaching out. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to see a lawyer," I said, "and you are going to help me." I drove straight to the offices of Harbor and Lane. Tessa met me in the lobby. She was wearing her work clothes, but she had taken a long lunch break to be there. "You look like you are on a warpath," Tessa said, eyeing my face. "I am," I said. "Did you bring the file?" Tessa tapped her tote bag. "Printed and organized. I even highlighted the dates where their financial emergencies coincided with his transfers. It is damning." Hales. We were shown into Elena Ward's office. Elena was a woman in her 40s with sharp glasses and a demeanor that suggested she did not suffer fools. She had the business card Daniel had given me on her desk. "Ms. Griffin," Elena said, shaking my hand. "Mr. Cross called ahead. He has placed a substantial retainer on file for your representation. He made it clear that I am working for you, not him. If you have a conflict with him, I am on your side." I appreciated that. We sat down. Tessa pulled out the file Daniel had emailed me, now organized into a timeline. I told Elena everything: the party, the public humiliation, the DNA test, the recording Maddie had made, the history Daniel had just filled in at the cafe. Elena listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers. "This is not just a family dispute, Ms. Griffin," Elena said calmly. "This is a complex case involving several actionable torts and potential criminal behavior." "Go on," I said. "First, there is fraud." Elena said, "If Mr. Cross sent money specifically designated for your support and education, and your parents used it for their own personal gain while concealing the source from you, that is misappropriation of funds, constructive fraud." She tapped the pad. "Then there is the defamation, the public statement that you were an intruder or ungrateful after they had systematically siphoned off your inheritance is malicious. The recording your sister made is crucial. It proves intent. It proves they knew the money was yours, and they conspired to keep it." "Can we sue them?" I asked. "We can do more than sue them," Elena said. "We can destroy the false narrative they have built. We can demand a forensic accounting of every dollar Daniel Cross sent. We can force them to repay the misappropriated funds. And given the amount over $300,000 by my rough estimate, we could potentially refer this to the district attorney for criminal charges. Though that is a nuclear option, I do not want them in jail." I said quietly, I want them to admit it, and I want my life back." "We will start with a demand letter," Elena said. "We will outline the evidence. We will demand a full accounting, and we will demand they cease all defamatory statements immediately." She looked at me over her glasses. "But I must warn you, Haley, this will get ugly. Parents like this, when they are cornered, they do not apologize. They attack. They already attacked." I said, "I am ready," before I left. Elena gave me one more piece of advice. "You mentioned a DNA test," she said. "Gentrace." I said, "I have a contact there." Elena said, "A forensic genealogist named Dr. Aris. If we are going to court, we need independent verification of the paternity, not just the results your mother flashed on a screen. I want you to reach out to him." I nodded. "I will do it today." I went back to work the next day. I had to. I could not hide in my apartment forever. The atmosphere at VerveTech was suffocating. I walked to my cubicle with my head down, but I could feel the eyes on me. The whispers stopped when I entered rooms. The break room cleared out when I went to get water. Around 10 o'clock, I received a text from a number I did not recognize. Check the group chat. I did not have a group chat with these people, but then I saw a notification on my screen. Someone had airdropped a video file to the entire marketing department. I clicked it. It was shaky. Vertical footage from inside the Crestview room. It showed Linda on stage, pointing at the screen. "Robert is not your father. Haley." The camera panned to me, standing there, looking like a deer in the headlights. It zoomed in on my face as my world collapsed. Then it cut to Robert screaming, "You are not even a griffin." I dropped my phone on my desk. My hands were shaking. Someone had leaked it. Someone had filmed my humiliation and was now passing it around like a viral meme. Haley. I looked up. Karen Blake, my boss, was standing at the entrance to my cubicle. She looked furious, but not at me. "Come with me," Karen said. "Now." She marched me into her office and slammed the door. She pulled the blinds shut. "I know about the video," Karen said. "IT is scrubbing it from the server right now, and we are tracking who sent it. If it was an employee, they are fired. Immediately." I sat in the chair, fighting back tears. "Everyone has seen it. Karen, everyone knows. Let them know," Karen said firmly. "Let them know you survived it." She walked around her desk and sat on the edge of it, facing me. "Haley, I was there. I saw what they did. It was cruel. It was abusive. And I want you to know that your job here is safe. You are a damn good manager. What your parents did says everything about them and nothing about you." She handed me a tissue. "Take the rest of the day if you need it, but do not let them push you out. You earned this chair. They did not give it to you." I wiped my eyes. "Thank you." "Karen, I stayed. I worked through the afternoon, keeping my door closed, focusing on spreadsheets and metrics. It was the only thing I could control. At 5 o'clock, I met Logan in the parking lot. I needed to talk. I needed him to step up. He was leaning against his truck, looking at his phone. When he saw me, he put it away. But his body language was closed off, arms crossed, shoulders hunched. "Did you see the video?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "One of the guys at my firm sent it to me." Said, "Isn't this your girl?" I winced. "I am sorry. Logan, it is humiliating." "Haley," Logan said, kicking at the pavement. "I have people asking me if your mom is crazy. I have people making jokes about mailmen and milkmen. I cannot control what they do." I said, "But I am handling it. I hired a lawyer. We are going to fight back." "A lawyer?" Logan looked at me, incredulous. "Haley, you are suing your parents. They committed fraud." "Logan, they stole money." "It is just money," he shouted, throwing his hands up. "It is family. You do not sue family. You walk away. You cut ties. But dragging this into court, it is going to be a circus, and I do not want to be part of a circus." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a good man in fair weather, but it was raining, and he was dissolving. "Can you handle this?" I asked quietly. "Can you handle being with me, knowing that this is my reality right now?" Logan looked away. He looked at the sky. He looked at his truck. He looked anywhere but at me. "I need time to think," he said. "That is an answer." I said. I walked to my car without looking back. I did not cry. I was done crying over men who were not strong enough to hold my hand when things got heavy. I did not go home. I drove to the suburbs, to Westbrook Hills. I needed to see them. One last time. Before the lawyers took over, before the letters were sent, I needed to look them in the eye and ask why. The house looked the same. The lawn was overgrown. The paint was peeling on the porch. I walked up the steps and used my key. I walked into the kitchen. Linda and Robert were sitting at the table, eating a pizza out of the box. The banality of it, the normalcy, made my blood boil. They looked up. Linda froze, a slice of pepperoni pizza halfway to her mouth. Robert put his beer down with a thud. You have some nerve coming here, Robert grumbled. After the scene you caused. The scene I caused, I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. You put my DNA on a projector screen. Dad, you disowned me in front of 200 people. Linda slammed the pizza box shut. We told the truth, Linda snapped. And look at you, strutting in here like you own the place. Did you come to apologize? Apologize. I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. For what? For being born, or for finding out you stole $300,000 from me? The room went deadly silent. Linda's face went white. Robert stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the linoleum. You have been talking to him, Robert accused. That liar. He is not a liar. I said, I saw the bank records. Robert, I saw the letters. 1996, 2005, 2014. Checks written to you. For me. Where did it go? It went to keeping a roof over your head, Robert shouted, his face turning purple. It went to feeding you. You charged me rent the summer I turned 18, I shouted back. You made me take out loans. You complained about every penny. And all the while, you were cashing his checks. It was compensation, Linda shrieked, standing up to join Robert. Compensation for what he did to our family. He ruined us. He ruined my reputation. That money was ours. It was marked for education, I yelled. It was marked for support. You stole it. You are ungrateful, Linda spat. We raised you, we loved you, and this is how you repay us by siding with a stranger. He is not a stranger, I said. He is my father. No! Robert roared. He slammed his fist onto the table so hard the pizza box jumped. I am your father, Robert screamed. Me. I walked the floor with you when you were sick. I taught you to ride a bike. Blood does not make a father. Haley. Sacrifice makes a father. Then why did you say it? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Why did you stand on that stage and say blood matters? Why did you say I was not a griffin? Why did you say I was nothing because I did not share your DNA? Robert froze. His mouth opened and closed. He looked suddenly old, fragile. I was angry. He stammered. You said I was an intruder. I said, you said I was a mistake. You cannot have it both ways. Dad, you cannot claim biology is everything when it suits you, and then claim it means nothing when you get caught stealing. Robert looked at me, his eyes wide and panicked. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. You do not understand, he whispered. You do not understand anything about blood. He turned and stumbled out of the kitchen. I heard the back door slam. Linda stood there, breathing hard, her chest heaving. Get out, she hissed. Get out of my house. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had sold my childhood for a monthly check. I am leaving. I said, but you should know. I hired a lawyer, and we are coming for everything. I walked out. I drove back to my apartment in a daze. My phone was buzzing in my purse. I parked the car and walked up to my unit. I sat on the couch and pulled out my phone. It was an email notification. From Dr. Aris, Gentrace. Subject urgent analysis of Griffin family DNA. I had contacted him that morning, sending him the raw data file Linda had inadvertently left on the public Gentrace profile she created for me, along with Robert's public profile data, which I found was linked to it. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Griffin, I have reviewed the raw data as requested. I can confirm the paternal match with Daniel Cross is 99.9% conclusive. However, in analyzing the profile of Robert Griffin to establish the lack of paternity, I noticed a significant anomaly in his own ancestral markers. Robert Griffin lists his heritage as purely English and German, based on the Griffin family tree he has public on the site. However, his Y chromosome markers, the DNA passed from father to son, do not match the Griffin Surname Project database. In layman's terms, Robert Griffin is not biologically related to the man he lists as his father. Arthur Griffin. There is a non-paternity event in his own direct line. He is, genetically speaking, not a Griffin. I stared at the screen. The words swam before my eyes. Robert was not a Griffin. The man who had obsessed over bloodlines. The man who had called me an intruder, The man who had screamed, "You are not even one of us." He was not one of them either. He was exactly like me. A product of a secret, a product of a lie. And suddenly, his rage made sense. His obsession with my illegitimacy was not just about me, it was about him. He was projecting his own deep-seated fear, the fear that he was a fraud. I sat alone in the dark, holding the phone. And for the first time in days, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like the holder of the ultimate trump card. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elena Ward's office, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but it did nothing to warm the chill in the room. I sat in a leather chair that cost more than my first car, holding a single sheet of paper that felt heavier than a brick, across from me. Elena was reviewing the email from Dr. Aris, her expression unreadable behind her glasses. "So, let me understand this correctly," Elena said, placing the paper down on her mahogany desk. "You are telling me that Robert Griffin, the man who publicly disowned you for not sharing his blood, is not biologically related to the Griffin family line he worships?" I nodded. "According to the forensic genealogist, yes. Robert's Y chromosome markers do not match the Griffin surname project. There was a non-paternity event in his line. His father, Arthur, the man I called Grandpa, was not his biological father." Elena leaned back, a slow, calculated smile spreading across her face. "This is not just irony, Haley," she said softly. "This is leverage. It feels like a weapon." I said, my voice quiet. "I do not want to be like them. Elena, I do not want to destroy him just because I can." Elena took off her glasses and cleaned them with a microfiber cloth. "We are not destroying him for sport. Haley, we are dismantling the pedestal he is standing on. Robert's entire defense, his moral high ground, his justification for abusing you is built on the sanctity of his bloodline. He cast you out because you were a contaminant. If we reveal that he is in the exact same position, his argument collapses. It neutralizes him." Daniel was sitting next to me. He had been silent for most of the meeting, staring at his hands. He looked tired. The stress of the last week was etched into the lines around his eyes. "I do not want a war," Daniel said, his voice deep and rough. "I know what Linda is capable of. If we humiliate them again, if we corner them, they will lash out. They will drag Haley through the mud in every grocery store and church in Oak Ridge Falls. They have already done that," I pointed out. "The video is still circulating. That is why we need to contain this," Daniel said. He turned to Elena. "I want a meeting, a sit-down. Here, in this office." "With them?" I asked, feeling a spike of anxiety. "With them," Daniel confirmed. "With lawyers present. We lay it all out. The money, the fraud, the lies, and this DNA evidence about Robert. We show them that we have the power to ruin them, and then we offer them a way out. A settlement," Elena said, nodding. "Exactly," Daniel said. "We tell them sign a statement acknowledging the truth, apologize to Haley, and agree to a non-disparagement clause. If they do that, we keep Robert's secret. We keep the fraud out of criminal court. We let them walk away with their shredded dignity intact. And if they refuse," I asked, "then we burn it down." Elena said, her voice sharp. "We file the civil suit. We release the forensic accounting. We subpoena Robert's DNA. We make it all public record." I looked at the paper in my hand. I thought about Robert's face at the party, the purple rage, the self-righteous hatred. "You are not even a Griffin." "Okay," I said, "let us set the meeting. But I had one condition. I wanted Maddie there." Elena warned me against it, saying it could complicate the attorney-client privilege dynamics. But I insisted. Maddie was the only other person who had lived inside that house. She was the only witness who mattered. Getting her to agree, however, was a different battle. I met Maddie at a park halfway between the city and the suburbs. It was a gray, overcast day, the kind of weather that felt appropriate for the disintegration of a family. Maddie was sitting on a swing, dragging the toes of her sneakers through the wood chips. "I cannot go." "Hales," she said immediately when I brought it up. "Mom is. She is on a rampage. She has been throwing things for 3 days. If she knows I am meeting with you and Daniel, she will kill me. She is not going to kill you, I said, leaning against the swing-set frame. She is a bully, Maddie. And bullies only have power when you are afraid of them. I am afraid of them, Maddie cried. I still live there. I do not have a fancy job or an apartment like you. I am stuck. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. It was a copy of the financial records Daniel had provided, specifically the pages I had flagged with neon sticky notes. Look at this, I said, holding it out to her. Maddie hesitated, then took the folder. What is it? These are the transfers from Daniel, I explained. Look at the memos. Maddie flipped through the pages. Her eyes widened as she read. December 2005, Christmas gifts for the girls. July 2010, summer camp fund for Haley and Madison. March 2012, girls' college savings. It says Madison. She whispered. I nodded. Daniel did not just send money for me. He sent money for the family. He thought he was supporting a household. He sent extra when you needed braces. He sent extra when you wanted to go to that art camp in 8th grade, the one Mom said we could not afford. Maddie looked up at me, her lip trembling. Mom told me we were too broke for camp. She said Dad's hours got cut. Dad's hours were fine. I said, and Daniel sent $2,000 that month specifically for that camp. They took it. Maddie, they took the money meant for your dreams, and they spent it on themselves. You are a victim in this too. Maddie stared at the paper, her knuckles turning white. She lied to me, Maddie whispered. She told me I was the special one. She told me she would give me the world if she could, but she stole it from me. Come to the meeting, I said gently. You do not have to say a word. Just sit there, be a witness. Show them that they have lost both of us. Maddie closed the folder. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life, I saw a flicker of the griffin's stubbornness directed at someone other than me. Pick me up, she said. I am not driving with them. The conference room at Harbor and Lane was designed to intimidate. The table was a slab of polished granite that looked like it weighed 2 tons. The chairs were high-backed and stiff. The view from the window was a panoramic sweep of the city skyline, a visual reminder of the power and money that resided in this building. We arrived first. Daniel, Elena, Maddie, and I. Daniel was pacing the length of the room. He wore a gray suit today, immaculate as always, but he kept adjusting his cufflinks. Are you sure about this? He asked Elena for the 3rd time. I am sure, Elena replied, arranging her files in a neat stack. We control the room. Daniel, we control the narrative. Maddie sat in the corner, as far away from the door as possible. She was wearing a hoodie and kept her arms crossed tight over her chest. I sat next to her, putting a hand on her arm. She did not pull away. At 2:00 exactly, the receptionist opened the door. Mr. and Mrs. Griffin are here, she announced. My parents walked in. They looked like ghosts of the people who had thrown the party 5 days ago. Robert had lost weight. His suit hung loosely on his frame, and his skin had a gray, papery quality. He refused to make eye contact with anyone. Linda, on the other hand, was vibrating with energy. It was a frantic, manic energy. She wore a bright red blazer, as if she were trying to signal dominance. But her eyes were wild. This is ridiculous, Linda announced before she had even reached a chair. We are only here because our lawyer said we had to listen to this nonsense before we sue you for harassment. She glared at Daniel. You have some nerve, dragging us here, after you ruined my daughter's birthday. Please take a seat, Mrs. Griffin, Elena said coolly. Linda huffed and pulled out a chair, sitting down with aggressive force. Robert sank into the chair next to her, looking at the granite tabletop as if he hoped to read his fortune in the stone. Their lawyer, a tired-looking man named Mr. Henderson, whom I recognized from a billboard on the highway, sat next to them. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Let us begin, Elena said. She did not waste time with pleasantries. She opened the main file and slid a copy across the granite to Mr. Henderson. We are here to discuss the systematic financial exploitation of your daughter. Haley Griffin, and the biological father of your child, Daniel Cross. Elena stated. Exploitation, Linda scoffed. That is a rich word for charity. Elena ignored her. She began the timeline. In 1995, you signed a letter acknowledging Daniel Cross's paternity. You agreed to accept financial support in exchange for his silence. Over the next 29 years, Mr. Cross transferred a total of $312,000 to accounts controlled by you. Elena pointed to the stack of bank records. These funds were explicitly labeled for the support, education, and well-being of Haley Griffin. Yet, Haley was forced to take out $40,000 in student loans. She was charged rent to live in your home. She was denied basic necessities that these funds were intended to cover. Linda slammed her hand on the table. We were drowning, Linda shouted. Do you have any idea what it costs to run a house? Robert's job was never enough. We had debt. We had medical bills. Elena looked at her calmly. And yet, in 2005, the same year you told Haley there was no money for a school trip, you purchased a timeshare in Florida. Robert flinched. In 2010, Elena continued, flipping a page, you bought a new truck for Robert, cash, $12,000. That same month, Daniel sent $2,000 for Madison's summer camp. Madison never went to camp. Maddie made a small, choked sound in the corner. Linda whipped her head around, noticing Maddie for the first time. Madison, Linda said, her voice shrill. What are you doing sitting with them? Get over here. Maddie shook her head. No, come here, Linda commanded. You are my daughter. I saw the transfers. Mom, Maddie said, her voice shaking but audible. I saw the memos. You stole from me, too. Linda's mouth opened and closed. For a second, she looked genuinely shocked that her golden child had developed a voice. It was not stealing, Linda yelled. Turning back to Elena, it was compensation for what Daniel asked. He spoke quietly, but his voice filled the room. For ruining our lives. Linda shrieked, pointing a finger at him. You think you can just send a check and be a father? You destroyed my marriage. You made Robert look like a fool. I had to live with the shame of what we did. That money was the price of admission. Daniel, it was the tax you paid for ruining my family. You seem to be confused. Mrs. Griffin? Elena cut in. Child support is the property of the child. It is not hush money. It is not spousal support. It is for the benefit of the minor. Diverting those funds for personal luxury items is fraud. It is theft. It was not luxury. Robert spoke for the first time. His voice was raspy, dry. We were just trying to survive. We were trying to look normal. Do you know what it is like, living in a town where everyone watches you? We had to keep up appearances. So you bought a truck instead of sending your daughter to college without debt? I asked. Robert looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot. You do not understand. Haley, you never understood. We sacrificed everything for you. You sacrificed nothing. I said, Daniel paid for it. You just took the credit. And then you stood on a stage and told the world, I was a leech, Linda sneered. You were a leech, always needing things, always looking at us with those judging eyes. You never fit in. You were always cold, just like him. She gestured to Daniel. He tried to buy your love, Linda spat. And now I see he succeeded. Look at you, sitting next to the rich man. I hope he is worth it. Daniel leaned forward. I did not buy her love, Linda. I paid for her safety, because you threatened to destroy her if I did not. And it turns out, you destroyed her anyway. Linda laughed, a harsh barking sound. We gave her a home. We gave her a name. A Griffin name, which is worth more than your money. That is actually what we need to discuss next, I said. I looked at Elena. She nodded. I picked up the file. Doctor, Aris had sent me. I slid it across the table toward Robert. What is this? Robert asked, staring at the folder. It is a report from the genetic genealogist at GenTrace. I said. Linda rolled her eyes. Oh God. More DNA nonsense. We already know you are not Robert's. We established that. This is not about me. I said, it is about Robert. Robert went still. He did not reach for the folder. He just stared at it, as if it were a bomb. You made a big speech at the party. Dad, I said, you talked about blood. You said I was an intruder. You said I was not a griffin. You said blood matters more than anything. It does, Robert whispered. Then you should read that report. I said. Robert's hand trembled as he reached out and opened the folder. He read the summary. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse. What does it say? Linda asked. Looking between us. Robert, what is it? Robert did not answer. He dropped the folder. He put his hands over his face. It says that Robert is not biologically related to Arthur Griffin, I said, addressing the room. The Y chromosome markers do not match. There was a non-paternity event in his line. Linda stared at me. You are lying. I am not. I said, the science does not lie. You said that yourself on stage. Robert is not a griffin. Biologically, he is just like me. He is the product of a secret. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed. Robert let out a sound, a low, agonizing moan. I knew. He whispered into his hands. Linda grabbed his arm. Robert, what are you saying? I knew, Robert yelled. Dropping his hands and looking at her, his eyes were wild with pain. I heard them. When I was 16, I heard Mom and Arthur fighting in the kitchen. Arthur yelled that I wasn't his. He said he knew Mom had been with that man from the shipyard. He looked around the room, his breathing shallow. I never asked. I never said a word. I tried to be the best griffin I could be. I tried to be perfect. I worked the double shifts. I mowed the lawn. I tried to earn the name. He looked at me. And then you came along, he said, his voice breaking, and you were proof. You were proof that blood could lie. Every time I looked at you, I saw myself. I saw the bastard child, and I hated it. I hated you for reminding me. So you punished me. I said softly, yes. Robert wept. I punished you. I wanted you to feel what I felt. I wanted you to feel like the outsider, so I could feel like I belonged. Linda pulled her hand away from him as if he were contagious. You lied to me, she whispered. You told me your family was pure. You told me the Griffin name meant everything. It does, Robert pleaded. It is who I am. You are a fraud, Linda screamed. She stood up, her chair toppling over. You are a bastard, just like her. Sit down, Linda Daniel barked. Linda spun on him. Do not tell me what to do. My life is ruined. I married a fraud. I raised a bastard. And now you want to take my money. It is not your money, Elena said sharply. It never was. Linda looked around the room like a trapped animal. Her eyes landed on Maddie. Madison, let us go. We are leaving. Maddie shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I am not going with you. Mom, you are crazy, Linda gasped. She looked at Robert, who was sobbing quietly at the table. She looked at me, sitting calmly next to Daniel. Fine, she hissed. Stay with them. Stay with the liars. She grabbed her purse. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, finally spoke up. Mrs. Griffin, you really should sit down. We have a settlement offer to discuss. And looking at the evidence, I strongly suggest you listen. Linda froze. She looked at the lawyer. Settlement, she spat. Elena slid a document across the table. We are at a crossroads. Linda, Elena said, Option A. You and Robert signed this agreement. You acknowledge that the funds sent by Daniel Cross were misappropriated. You agree to a repayment plan. We can discuss terms, perhaps a lien on the house in Westbrook Hills. You issue a written apology to Haley and Daniel, and you sign a strict non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. You never speak of this again. You never speak about Daniel or Haley publicly again. And option B? Linda asked, her eyes narrowing. Option B, Elena said, leaning forward. We file a civil suit for fraud, conversion, and defamation tomorrow morning. We release the forensic accounting to the court, which makes it public record. We release the DNA findings regarding Robert's parentage to the court. We subpoena every financial record you have for the last 30 years. We depose you. We depose your neighbors. We drag every single skeleton out of your closet and parade them down Main Street." Elena paused. "And given the amount of money involved, we will also forward our file to the district attorney's office for review regarding criminal charges. Grand larceny is a serious offense. Mrs. Griffin." Linda looked at the document. She looked at Robert, who was broken, a shell of a man. She looked at me. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know." I said, "The feeling is mutual, but I'm offering you mercy. Take it." Linda snatched the paper from the table. She did not read it. She just stared at it, her hands shaking. Robert looked up. His eyes were empty. "Just sign it, Linda," he croaked. "Please, I cannot have everyone know. About the money," she asked. "About me," he whispered. "About who I am." Linda looked at her husband with pure contempt. "You are pathetic," she said. She sat down. She took a pen from her purse. She stabbed the paper with the tip. "We will sign," she said. "But I never want to see you again. Haley, you are dead to us." I stood up. I looked at the parents who had raised me, the parents who had fed on me. "I was dead to you the day I was born." I said, "I am just making it official." I turned to Daniel. "Let us go," I said. We walked out of the conference room. Maddie followed us. We left Linda and Robert sitting at the granite table, surrounded by the wreckage of their own lies, signing away the house they had stolen from me, in the hallway. I leaned against the wall and exhaled. It was a long, shuddering breath. "It is over," Daniel said softly. "Not yet," I said, "but it is a start." Maddie came up to me and hugged me. She was crying. "What do I do now?" she asked. "I cannot go back there." "You can stay with me," I said. "My couch pulls out. We will figure it out." Daniel cleared his throat. I have a guest room," he said tentatively, "at my house in Seattle. If you ever want to visit, or stay." Maddie looked at him. She looked at me. "Maybe," she said. We walked to the elevator. The doors opened, and we stepped inside, leaving the Griffins behind us. But as the doors closed, I knew that signing a paper did not erase 30 years. The legal battle was won, but the real work, the work of building a life on a foundation that wasn't made of sand, was just beginning. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room from 2 weeks ago were still fresh in my memory, a stark, sterile white that seemed to bleach the color out of the world. Daniel had called it a minor episode. His doctor had called it a warning shot. Angina, stress-induced cardiac strain, whatever the medical terminology. The message was clear: 30 years of carrying a secret, followed by the explosion of that secret, had taken a toll on his heart. That health scare was the reason we were back in the conference room at Harbor and Lane on a Tuesday morning. The weather outside matched the mood inside, a relentless gray drizzle that blurred the skyline of Oak Ridge Falls into a smear of concrete and steel. Daniel sat at the head of the granite table. He looked better than he had in the hospital, but there was a fragility to him now, a subtle tremor in his hands that he tried to hide by clasping them on top of a thick leather folio. "I am not dying." "Haley," Daniel said, catching me staring at his hands, "it was just a wake-up call." "You are not immortal either," I said, taking the seat to his right, "and given the stress my mother is putting you through, I think we are allowed to be cautious." Elena Ward sat across from us, her posture perfect, her expression serious. She had a stack of documents in front of her that looked substantial enough to anchor a ship. "We are here to finalize the estate planning," Elena said. Given the volatility of the situation with the Griffins, Daniel wanted to ensure that his assets and his intentions were legally bulletproof. Daniel opened the leather folio. "I have no other children." "Haley," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "I have no wife. My parents passed away 10 years ago. Everything I have built, my business in Seattle, my investments, the property, it goes to you." I felt a wave of discomfort. We had known each other for less than a week. This felt too fast, too heavy. "Daniel," I said, "I do not want your money. I did not come to you for a payday. I know." Daniel said. That is exactly why I'm giving it to you. If you were like Linda, I would be donating it to a cat shelter. He offered a small, tired smile. Then his face grew serious again. But this is not just about assets. Haley, it is about agency. For 30 years, I sent money that was used to control you. Linda used it to keep their house afloat, to buy their cars, to maintain the illusion of their perfect family, all while telling you that you were a burden. She used my money to make you feel small. He tapped the document in front of him. This trust is different. This is a war chest. I am giving you the resources to do whatever you want. If you want to sue them into oblivion, you will have the funds to pay Elena for the next 20 years. If you want to walk away and never speak to any of us again, you will have the means to disappear and start a new life in Paris or Tokyo. He looked me in the eye. This is not payment for being my daughter. You cannot buy a relationship. This is me giving you the choices I was never able to give you when you were a child. I looked at the papers. The Haley Griffin Revocable Trust. I swallowed the lump in my throat. My entire life, money had been a weapon. It had been the reason I couldn't go on school trips. It had been the reason I was guilt-tripped for eating an extra slice of pizza. It had been the invisible chain binding me to Linda and Robert. And now, Daniel was handing me the key to unlock that chain forever. Before I could reach for the pen, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. I heard the receptionist's voice, raised in alarm. "Sir, you cannot go back there." "Ma'am, please." Then came the familiar, sharp click of heels on the tile floor. "Moving fast. We know they are in here." Linda's voice pierced the heavy oak door. "Do not touch me. I have a right to face my accusers." The door swung open with a violence that made the frame shudder. Linda and Robert Griffin stood in the doorway. They looked frantic. Linda's hair was slightly disheveled. Escaping the hairspray helmet she usually wore, she was clutching her purse like a shield. Robert stood behind her, breathing heavily, his face a mask of anxious sweat. They had not been invited. We had been careful, but Oak Ridge Falls was a small town, and secrets here were as porous as limestone. Maddie, who had been sitting quietly in the corner chair reading a magazine, jumped up. "Mom." Maddie gasped. "How did you know we were here?" "Cousin Sarah saw you," Linda snapped, glaring at Maddie. "She saw you and Haley walking into the building with him. She works on the 4th floor." Linda turned her glare on Daniel. "So this is it," she demanded. Marching into the room, the final betrayal. "We hear rumors that you are writing a will. Are you cutting us out?" Elena stood up. "Mrs. Griffin, you are trespassing. This is a private meeting. We are family," Linda shouted. "Or we were, until he poisoned everyone." She pointed a shaking finger at Daniel. "You are writing us out, aren't you? You are giving everything to her." "It is my money." "Linda," Daniel said calmly. He did not stand up. He did not look intimidated. He looked like a man who was done being blackmailed. "Of course I'm giving it to her. She is my daughter. She is our daughter," Robert yelled from the doorway. He stepped into the room, looking gray and sickly. "We raised her. We are the ones who put in the time. If there is money on the table, we deserve a share. We have debts, Daniel. You know we have debts." I stared at them. It was breathtaking. Really. After the DNA reveal, after the fraud accusations, after the settlement negotiations where we had presented proof of their theft, they still believed they were owed something. Their entitlement was a black hole that could swallow the sun. "You deserve nothing," I said, my voice cold. "You spent $300,000 of his money on trucks and vacations. You have already received your inheritance, Dad. You just spent it before I grew up. Don't you get smart with me," Robert warned, though his voice lacked its usual thunder. He looked at the papers on the table. "Is that it? Is that the check?" "It is a trust," Elena said, stepping between Robert and the table, "and it concerns only Mr. Cross and Mrs. Griffin. You need to leave, now, or I will call security." "I am not leaving until I get answers," Linda shrieked. She looked at me. "You are doing this to hurt us. Haley, You are turning him against us. You are whispering lies in his ear to make sure we get nothing." I stood up slowly. I did not have to whisper anything. "Mom, the bank records shouted loud enough." I looked at Elena. "Give them the offer again," I said. Elena nodded. She picked up a folder from her desk, the final settlement agreement we had drafted 3 days ago. "Since you are here," Elena said, her voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm legal register, "let us be clear about your position." She held up the document. "This is the settlement. It requires you to sign a confession acknowledging the misappropriation of funds. It requires a formal written apology to Haley and Daniel. And it requires you to agree, permanently, to never contact Daniel Cross or Haley Griffin again. And if we don't," Linda challenged, crossing her arms, "you won't sue us. You don't have the stomach for it. It would embarrass Haley too much." Elena smiled. It was a razor-sharp smile. "If you do not sign, we file the civil suit tomorrow morning. And in that suit, we will include the forensic genealogy report regarding Robert's parentage." Robert flinched as if he had been struck. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. "No," he whispered. "Yes," Elena said. "It will be public record. Robert, the court filings are open to the press. Everyone in Oak Ridge Falls, your neighbors, your boss, your drinking buddies at the lodge will know that the man who preached about bloodlines is not actually a Griffin. They will know your entire identity is a fabrication." Linda looked at Robert. She saw the terror in his eyes. For the first time, she seemed to realize that her husband was the weak link. "You wouldn't," Linda hissed at me. "You wouldn't humiliate your father like that. He humiliated me in front of 200 people." I said, "He put a 0% on a projector screen. He told me I was an intruder. I took a step toward them. You asked if I have the stomach for it. I do. I have lost my reputation. I have lost my boyfriend. I have lost the illusion of a family. I have nothing left to lose. Mom, but you have your pride. You have your standing in the community. You have the lie that you are good. Christian people." I leaned in. "I will burn that lie to the ground. I will make sure every cashier at the grocery store knows you stole from your own child." Linda recoiled. She looked at me with something new in her eyes. It wasn't love. It wasn't even hate. It was fear. Robert looked at the settlement document Elena was holding. "We sign it," Robert muttered. His voice was barely audible. What Linda snapped. "We sign it." "Linda," Robert shouted, his voice cracking. I cannot have them know. About Arthur. About me." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "If we sign, you bury the DNA report. You promise it stays in the vault." I said, "As long as you stay out of my life." Linda looked between us. She was losing control. She was losing the narrative. "I won't be bullied," she cried. "I am the victim here. Stop it." The voice came from the corner. We all turned. Maddie was standing up. She had been so quiet I had almost forgotten she was there. Her face was red, streaked with tears, but her fists were clenched at her sides. "Stop it." "Mom," Maddie said. "Just stop lying." "Madison," Linda gasped. "Whose side are you on?" "I am on the side of the truth," Maddie yelled. "And I am tired. I am so tired of living in a house where everything is a transaction. I am tired of you using love as leverage. If you are good, we love you. If you are quiet, we love you." Maddie walked over to stand next to me. She looked at our parents. "You stole from Haley. But you stole from me too. You stole my sister. You made me think she was mean and cold, when really she was just surviving you. And you stole the money Daniel sent for us. You let me think we were poor while you bought new cars. Maddie, you do not understand finances." Robert tried to say, "I understand enough." Maddie cut him off. "I understand that you value your secrets more than your children." She looked at Robert. "Sign the paper, Dad, or I will tell everyone myself. I will post it on Facebook. I do not care. I am done covering for you." The silence that followed was absolute. Robert stared at his golden child, the one he had protected, the one he thought was loyal to the end, and he saw that he had lost her too. Robert slumped. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "Give me the pen," he whispered. Robert Linda shrieked. "Shut up!" Linda Robert roared. It was a guttural sound, full of 30 years of repressed shame. "Just shut up, it is over." He walked to the desk. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen Elena offered him. He scratched his signature on the settlement agreement. He did not read it. He just signed. Then he stepped back, looking at the floor. Linda stared at the paper. She stared at Daniel, who was watching her with a look of profound pity. She stared at me. "You think you have won," she whispered, her voice venomous. "You think because you have his money and his lawyers. You are better than us. But you will regret this. Haley, you will wake up one day and realize that money cannot buy you a family. I have a family," I said, putting my arm around Maddie. I just had to trim the dead branches to find it. Linda snatched the pen from the desk. She signed the document with a violent slash of ink. Tearing the paper slightly, she threw the pen down. "I hope you rot," she said to Daniel. Then she turned and marched out of the room, her heels clicking a retreat. Robert lingered in the doorway. He looked at the signed paper. He looked at Daniel. Finally, he looked at me. He opened his mouth as if to say something, maybe an apology, maybe an excuse, but the words died in his throat. I do not know who I am anymore," he muttered. He turned and shuffled down the hallway after Linda, looking smaller and older than I had ever seen him. The door clicked shut. The silence in the room was heavy. But it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a storm that had finally blown itself out. Daniel let out a long breath. He picked up his pen. He looked at the trust documents, the papers that would transfer his legacy to me, the papers that would give me the power to define my own future. He signed his name, Daniel Cross. He signed the next page, and the next. When he was finished, he capped the pen and pushed the stack toward Elena. "It is done," Daniel said. Elena organized the papers, tapping them into a neat stack. "It is done." She agreed. "The settlement is binding. The trust is established. They cannot touch you. Haley, legally, you are untouchable." I looked at the papers. I looked at the signature of the man who had fought to be my father, and the signature of the man who had signed away his rights to protect his own lie. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I had expected to feel triumphant. I had expected to feel a rush of victory, a cinematic moment of vindication. Instead, I felt hollow. I walked over to the window and looked out at the rain. The city looked the same as it had an hour ago. The cars were still moving. The world hadn't stopped just because the Griffin family had imploded. I realized then that no lawyer, no trust fund, and no court order could give me what I had actually wanted. They couldn't give me a childhood where I felt safe. They couldn't give me a mother who loved me without conditions. They couldn't scrub the memory of the humiliation at the Crestview room. The legal victory was a shield, not a cure. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Daniel. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. "I will be," I said. I turned to look at him. I saw the worry in his eyes, the same green eyes I saw in the mirror every day. I saw Maddie sitting at the table, wiping her eyes, looking terrified but free. I realized that while I couldn't fix the past, I had stopped the cycle. I had stopped them from taking any more from me. I had stopped them from taking Maddie. I picked up the copy of the settlement agreement, the piece of paper that confirmed my parents were frauds, and that I was free. I felt a weight lift. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but it was peace. "Let us go get lunch," I said to Daniel and Maddie. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Daniel smiled. It was a genuine smile, reaching his eyes. "I would like that," he said. We walked out of the office together. Leaving the empty chairs and the signed papers behind us, we stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed, blocking out the view of Harbor and Lane, I took a deep breath. I was 30 years old. I had a new father, a reclaimed sister, and a future that was finally, terrifyingly, wonderfully mine. The story of the Griffins was over. The story of Haley was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to Revenge Stories. I hope you found Haley's journey of reclaiming her dignity and truth as powerful as I did writing it. It is a reminder that family isn't always blood. It's the people who show up for you when the lights go out. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with a family member? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, drama, and redemption. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, Till.